Eve Leatherland was born in 2015. Her father, Dean Bird, and mother, Abigail Leatherland, had already separated. Bird saw Eve for the first time when she was only 3 months old. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw her. She was so adorable with a big smile. It felt like she had just recognized her biological father. Eve was the one who brought her father and mother close once again. They started living together, and these were the most precious days of Eve's short life. After 7 months, though, her parents once again decided to separate. After a couple of months, Dean was told that Leatherland and her new boyfriend, Thomas Curd, had moved to Cornwall, but he didn't believe it and thought she might have just gone on vacation. Dean was taking care of Eve once a week, so he thought she would be back in just a few days. That said, he began to feel worried and called Leatherland. Leatherland didn't accept the call, so he texted her. After no response, he decided to wait for her to return because his name was not on Eve's birth certificate, and he knew that he had no right to go to the solicitor or to try and find their whereabouts. Leatherland, 26, was in a relationship with Curd, 31. After 3 months, Curd moved into Leatherland's house. Leatherland was a lazy mother and didn't care much about Eve's health. She was always busy watching TV, playing games, browsing Facebook, and having fun with her boyfriend. Leatherland began to feel unwell and left her daughter to Curd's care. She would sleep for hours, and Curd would put Eve to bed, feed her, or change her diapers. Eve began to look pale and had dark circles under her eyes with every passing day. She was getting weaker and looked sick, but would smile and play with toys when she was close to her mother. Leatherland noticed her deteriorating health, but didn't care, thinking maybe she just had a viral infection. Whenever she would cry and look at her mom, Leatherland would consider her clingy and annoying. Days kept passing by, and Eve's condition got worse. Eve began to sleep a lot, and after waking up, she would cry until she would get tired and then go back to sleep again. Leatherland called the hospital on October 5th, 2017, and informed them about Eve's condition. Eve was rushed to Derriford Hospital's emergency department. Sister Sophie Brock was on duty that day. Eve looked pale and lifeless. Her nails were filled with dirt. When they took off her clothes, they found bruises on her nappy line. The bruising looked a couple of days old, and there was also what looked like a splayed hand around the waist area. The doctors attempted to revive Eve, but an anesthetist was unable to open her jaw because it was so rigid. Her eye had a bloodshot. A bloodshot area to the eye was a condition associated with a non-accidental injury. Paramedics quickly informed Abigail about her daughter's condition. There was a slight worry on Leatherland's face, but she began to scroll her phone sitting at the bedside, while Curd's face showed strange expressions. He was very pale, agitated, and shaky. Abigail and Curd went for a cigarette. When they came back smiling and laughing, Sister Sophie noticed their body language, which alarmed her because their daughter was on the brink of death and there were no worries on their face. A little while later, Eve was pronounced dead. Eve's death was not normal, and it seemed like she was tortured and purposefully killed. After a complete medical checkup, police got involved. Leatherland and Curd were arrested on murder charges. Dean Bird, Eve's biological father, was sleeping at home when police knocked on his door. He quickly opened the door and said, "What do you want? Is it about Eve?" The news that the police gave him broke his heart. He cried bitterly for 3 days over Eve's pictures and videos. The revelations made by medical experts were eye-opening and heartbreaking. Eve was injured at home in Liskeard, Cornwall, where Abigail lived with Curd. Professor David Mangum, a histopathologist, said he found evidence of at least 3 attacks on Eve Leatherland. Abigail was too busy in her comfortable life, so she gave the care of Eve over to Curd. While Leatherland slept, Curd would torture Eve for hours. He would beat her, punch her, and leave her crying for hours. When Leatherland would wake up, she always found Eve sleeping. She never came to check if she was okay, even if Eve would wake up crying. Eve was suffering from several injuries to her tiny body for months. It was strange Leatherland never noticed her agony and pain. Eve suffered 12 rib fractures, 2 skull fractures, and a ruptured liver. Mangum said 3 rib fractures had begun healing before being refractured. Older fractures occurred between 3 to 6 days before Eve's death, and the more recent ones were 1 to 4 days old. Mangum said the fractures had been caused by compression with a significant degree of force that went beyond rough handling or the force required to carry out CPR. He said Eve suffered a skull fracture from blunt impact to the back of her head 3 to 6 days before her death, and a refracture there 2 to 12 hours before death. Her face had bruises that showed Curd was torturing her when he was in Leatherland's house. When Eve was brought to the hospital, her arm was stiff and she was not responding. After the last assault, Eve's pain had grown and she was given a heavy dose of medication that actually killed her. By the time emergency services arrived, Eve had been dead for many hours. At the time, when Eve needed medical attention, Curd and Leatherland watched TV, played video games, sent each other text messages, and chatted to people on Facebook. According to the medical staff, Eve could have been revived if brought to the hospital earlier and given the proper treatment. It was clear that Eve's death was purely due to Leatherland's negligence and Curd's cruelty. The medical team also found no trace of food in her stomach. Neither of them even tried to provide her with food or any medical help. Both Curd and Leatherland had gone on trial, accused of murder, manslaughter by gross negligence, and causing or allowing the death of a child. After completing the evidence, the prosecution dropped the murder charge against Leatherland, saying it was Curd who beat Eve and then gave her the fatal dose of codeine to hide the pain she was suffering from. When doctors had asked about Curd, Leatherland told them that Curd had moved into her house over the weekend, but this was a lie. They had been together for a while. Both Leatherland and Curd began to give statements against each other during the hearings. Curd explained that on the day he put Eve back to bed at 9:30 p.m. and Leatherland woke up at 10:30 a.m. but didn't check Eve, the next check was 5 minutes before the 999 call. Dean Bird traveled for 11 hours every day to Truro Crown Court for the 3-week trial. He said, "I was really angry. I just wanted to rip their heads off. I had all sorts of emotions going on, and before the trial, I didn't know everything about the case and all of Eve's injuries. I looked at him a couple of times, and the anger just boiled up inside me. I saw him looking at me, and we locked eyes. I thought I was going to be upset in court, more than what I was, but I never cried at any point. I think it was my anger taking over," Bird said. The prosecutor, Sean Brunton, Queen's Counsel, said Eve's injuries were most commonly associated with a car crash. The pain she must have experienced can only be imagined. The court heard Eve had almost certainly been dead for several hours when her mother dialed 999 at 12:44 on October 5, 2017. Tom Curd will serve a minimum of 20 years behind bars before being considered for release. Eve's mom, Abigail Leatherland, was in tears during the sentencing hearing at a packed courtroom. She was convicted of causing or allowing the death of a child. She was jailed for 3.5 years by the judge, Justice Juliet May. That's a wrap for today. Don't forget to smash the thumbs up, share, and subscribe to the channel to see our latest content.